Welcome again to another video on project management for technology. This goes along with Chapter 5 and is entitled Duration Compression, also known as crashing. I'm Dr. James Reneau Ph.D. from Shawnee State University, and I'll be taking you through this presentation. In this video, I'm going to define a couple of techniques, one called crashing and one called fast tracking, and then I'll go through a specific crash to a project to try to get it to a shorter time for the least amount of money and show you some techniques to do that. Okay, let's define a couple of terms first that deal with reducing the length of a project. The first I'm going to talk about is called fast tracking. And fast tracking is where we get things done in parallel that were originally scheduled sequentially. Stop and think about your college degree. If you're a student, you could possibly take 18, 21, 24 hours a semester. Oh boy, it's really, really brutal. But you could get done in 2.5, 3 years if you did that. So it doesn't really cost a lot of money, a lot of different money, actually probably costs less. Well, you've got to pay those extra course fees to take the overloads. But getting things done in parallel that were originally scheduled sequentially is called fast tracking. Another technique for reducing the duration of a project is called crashing. And in crashing, we look at cost and schedule trade-offs to try to get the project done quicker. Remember the old adage, time is money, so why don't we, well, is there a way to potentially spend a little bit more money, overtime, extra help, that type of stuff, to get projects or to get tasks done a little quicker and thus reduce the overall time spent on the project. So I'd like to now go through a simple crashing problem, starting at the beginning and going through the idea of crashing a problem. So I'm going to start by laying out a activity on node network diagram. Here's the project with the task, the time, duration, and the prerequisites or predecessor tasks. You also see that over here I have defined all of the paths through the project and the time through all of the paths. This was covered in previous examples and previous videos, so I'm not going to go into the details of how to do this. But if you're going to crash a project, do this first so that you can see all of the critical paths and identify how to go forward with the crash. So looking at the previous project, the project on the previous slide, your manager would come to you, or your boss or your sponsor comes along and says, you know what, we've got to get this done in 18 weeks. Just got to happen. Well, you go back to your subject matter experts and you ask them questions about, well, okay, what can I shorten and what is the cost to shorten? You can see here as an example of it's going to take $5,000 worth of extra expense to shorten A from 3 to 2 weeks. B, it's going to take $4,000 to shorten it a week. C, it's going to take $2,000 to shorten it 2 weeks. That's an interesting idea. D would take $3,000 for a week. E would take $2,000 for a week. Notice that F couldn't be shortened because there are often some work packages that just can't be shortened. You just can't do it any quicker. So the typical thing to do when you're given a crashing problem is to identify work packages on the critical path and shorten the cheapest one of those first. Remembering that as you go through the process of crashing, as you shorten a task on the critical path, that path may no longer be critical anymore, and another path may become critical, which is why I always lay out a full network diagram and all of the paths as I'm going through the crashing. Let's see that in action. So let's look at the least expensive item on the critical path, and that would be task E for $2,000. What that's going to do is it's going to shorten both paths because E happens to be on both paths, And it's then going to take the duration of the project down to the critical path of ABDEG to 20, and the other path through the project, ACFEG, now becomes 18. Let's see what our next thing to do is. The next least expensive item on the critical path would be item D, to crash by 1 week, which is going to change the critical path ABDEG to 19 and not affect the other path ACFEG. We're getting a lot closer. Let's see what the next step would be. The next least expensive item to crash would be item B, and we can crash it by 1 week for $4,000. After the third work package being crashed, we're now down to ABDEG at 18 weeks and ACFEG at 18 weeks. So we've crashed the project down to 18 weeks, but pay attention that now both paths through the project are critical. They're both now on the critical path, and every path through is 18 weeks. And the total cost for crashing this project is $9,000. So you can go to your sponsor, you can go to your budget committee, you can go to your client or whoever else and say, okay, we can do it, but we're going to need an extra $9,000 to pull it off. Just some notes. Your critical path may change as you shorten a path, so you need to keep a list of all of the paths and be sure to update them after every item, after every work package that you adjust. Also, some tasks may be reduced by different lengths for different costs. In other words, maybe you could have crashed B for 1 week for $1,000, but if you crash it by 2 weeks or reduce it 2 weeks, it's going to cost $5,000. So at that point, you need to look at both scenarios of crashing it by 1 or crashing it by 2, depending upon the cost. Maybe you've got a piece of equipment that you need to rent, and you can crash the project by a week for renting it for this much, but you can crash it by 2 weeks for renting it for a longer period of time. So you're going to have to play all the different scenarios. And sometimes these crashes become extremely complex, especially if you're dealing with hundreds of work packages or dozens of work packages and lots of different things you can potentially crash. You've got to go through a lot of the different scenarios, and it's literally just working through all of the options and trying to figure out what's the best way to get this done. This presentation was based loosely upon parts of Chapter 5 from Kim Heldman's CompTIA Project Plus study guide, and the reference to that is here. And I would like to thank you for watching this video on duration compression. This video is copyright 2020 by me, James Reneau Ph.D. You can contact me at jreneau@shawnee.edu, and this work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike 4.0 International License. And again, thank you for watching.